So we're definitely going to be talking about these lenses right here. The newest full frame autofocus anamorphic lenses by Sirui. Now this is the Astra, it's a 1.33 times and it's a T1.8, super fast for the mirrorless cameras. This thing is pretty special. So Sirui finally have released the world's first full frame autofocus anamorphic cinema lenses. They have a 1.33 times squeeze, they're a T1.8, they have blue flares or the neutral flares. They come in E, L, or Z mount. At the moment, they come in 50, 75, and 100mm focal lengths, and the weights of the lenses will vary, but they're about 620 grams. At the time of the release, there's an early bird price of $799 per lens, or you can get the full set for $23.99. And prices will vary depending on when you get them. Now, in my opinion, I think this lens is going to sell absolutely incredibly well because there's so many people out there that always comment on all my anamorphic videos and go, is this lens autofocus? It's like, no, it's a manual focus cinema lens. But now we do actually have the full frame version of what they actually released for the APS-C. They released the 20mm and the 40mm for the APS-C range. Now this is the full frame range, the 50, 75, and 100mm. Obviously, they will be making more, in the wider sort of range because, 50 is fairly telephoto, but it's a fantastic lens to pick up first if you're only getting one. But if you get the triple set, I mean, that's even better. Now, like I said, there's a lot of people out there that want just autofocus. You not have to worry about any kind of manual focus cinema lenses. That's perfectly fine. But for me, I love the manual focus cinema lenses that are out. And the Sirui have their Iron Star, which is phenomenal, has a brilliant look. It's not too clinical, but it doesn't have too much character as well. And in all honesty, I think these are very similar. These are not too clinical, but definitely not crazy anamorphic because they're a 1.33 times squeeze, so they'll give you a really nice squeeze factor on a 16:9 sensor or a 17:9 sensor, and not just too over the top with the character where everything's out of focus. There's a ton of chromatic aberration. These aren't those type of lenses, but we got a lot to talk about in this video. So one of the most interesting things happens to be the focus gearing. Now this definitely reminds me of like the old school days of DSLR autofocus lenses, where essentially you can override the autofocus lens and you'll actually see the actual main focus element turn inside, and you can override it with this. So this actually has physical hard stops. So it's kind of focused by wire, but kind of not at the same time. Like as soon as you hit it into manual focus, then this is where the manual focus ring sort of takes control. I mean, you could even say it's very similar to Sony's 28 to 135 cinema zoom lens. Like that's pretty much the same design, but that one you kind of click it back and then manual focus, and then click it forward to have autofocus. This one you literally just press the autofocus to manual focus switch, and then you can go into that manual focus thing. But this could be great if you do want to use it with manual focus focusing motors, because you do actually have those physical hard stops that pretty much most autofocus lenses just don't have. And that makes it really difficult. So you can use it as a manual focus lens like that, or you can still just throw it into autofocus and use it like a regular autofocus lens. But obviously, we got to talk about the autofocus performance. Now you can see the autofocus performance here with the 50mm at T1.8 tracking. It is absolutely fast. It is incredible, and obviously this will just depend on your camera's settings as well. Now you can see me jumping out and in frame, and you can see it does pulse a little bit, but once again you have to dial in your camera's settings. Autofocus performance is almost like a native Sony lens, which is pretty incredible. With the 75mm, I mean, it seems like it's pretty much the same as the 50mm. You can see there when I jump out of frame, it doesn't really know what to focus on, but this is just jumping out of frame and jumping back in frame, and it's seeing a human. So this is purely up to your camera's performance, but it's super fast and super tacky, which is exactly what you want. Okay, so this is what I'm trying to say about the transition speed. So this is on transition speed 2 out of 7. Before it was on 5 out of 7. So essentially, if I jump out of frame, it's going to do a very slow focus pull, which looks far more natural. And that's what I'm trying to say, is that a lot of these new Sirui lenses are incredible when it comes to autofocus and tracking. almost like a native Sony lens. It really does come down to the camera settings at the end of the day as well. And when it comes to the autofocus noise in this lens, there doesn't seem to be any. It is absolutely silent. They have really dialed in the autofocus in this lens, pretty much just like their Aurora range. So they've done incredibly well considering, you know, it is an anamorphic lens. Now, some of the other build qualities, I mean, it has that iris lock. If you don't want to, you know, adjust your iris, you can just lock it, and that's great because it's not going to switch on you. You can stay in automatic and control it through your camera, or you could be just like a regular cinema lens, unlock it, and then control your aperture through that. But then it also has that declickable sound, so you have nice smooth aperture controls rather than those clicking noises. Really depends on how you shoot, but you also have a function button on the side, and like I said, that autofocus to manual focus switch. Then when it comes to the front filter thread, it's a 67mm front filter thread, which I know is going to suit a lot of people because there are a ton of, especially Sony shooters, a ton of G Master lenses, the prime lenses that have 67mm front filter thread, but it is consistent, which is awesome, through the 50, 75, and the 100. Not sure what the wider ones will be, but fingers crossed they will be consistent at a 67mm front filter thread as well. Not a fan of when they start changing, you know, front filter threads, because then you have to have different adapters. You can't literally just put it straight onto a different lens if you're going to be changing it out. Now, as you can see here, I've got it on my Nikon ZR. Now, they do actually make them for Z mount, but this is actually the E mount version. I've got that mega adapt where I can put all my Sony lenses onto the Nikon system, but I'll put a little thing up here to show what mounts these actually come in. So when we have a look at this lens chart, when it comes to videography and cinematography, it's never always about sharpness. It's about learning the characteristics of the lenses and using it to your advantage with your storytelling. Now with the 50mm t1.8 in the center, it's relatively sharp and it does fall off softness out to the edges. If you do stop it down to f2 or f2.8, obviously it does get a little bit sharper, less vignetting, but you can see there is pin cushioning through this lens. Now if you go to 75mm, it does seem to perform pretty much identical with T1.8, T2 and T2.8. And it's a very similar story with the 100mm at T1.8, T2 and T2.8. Very similar sharpness, very similar pin cushion distortion, and very similar coating colors. The colors seem to be consistent through these three lenses. Now when it comes to chromatic aberrations, I mean, they're pretty much exactly the same. They're very well controlled. There doesn't really seem to be too much chromatic aberration with these three lenses. Now, let's talk about the look and feel of these lenses. As you saw with the image quality, they're pretty clinically clean, but when it comes to the center, they do start to get a little bit softer out to the edges, which shows that a little bit of character. So they are probably the most character-driven, I suppose, anamorphic lenses in the Sirui range. Even though they're at 1.33 times, they still have really nice out of focus backgrounds with character in them. Obviously, they've done that on purpose because they've been known to have fairly clinically clean lenses, especially in the Aurora range. Like those autofocus lenses are pretty much G Master quality. They are pristine, clean, and crisp. So these ones will just give you a little bit more character, and definitely great for narrative work and potentially some commercials and stuff. It really depends on what you're going to be using anamorphic lenses for, but I do like the look that comes out of these. Now, yes, as you saw in the image quality, they do have pin cushion distortion. Now, I know a lot of people don't like pin cushion distortion, but there are some people that just don't care, just like me. It really doesn't matter. You can actually change this in post-production if you really want to. Simple, a couple of clicks. It's nothing massive, but it really depends on what you like, and this one has pin cushion distortion. Now, as you can see here by the silver ring as well, that I do have the silver flare, or essentially the flare color that your light source actually has. So it takes on the exact same color as what your light source is. Me personally, I prefer blue flares. So this is kind of like that neutral, and I've got a warm light there, so I'm going to get a warm flare. Now, talking about flaring, the 50mm does seem to flare the least. When it comes to the 75 and 100, the 100 seems to flare the most and ghost the most. 75 is kind of in between the 50 and 100, but they still flare quite a lot for an anamorphic lens, and they do look nice in my opinion. I love flaring artifacts, especially if you're trying to use it to your advantage. But if you don't want flares, then obviously just use matte boxes and try and block the direct sunlight going into the lens. Now in terms of the bokeh shape, all three do seem very similar. It does seem like the 50mm on the edges seems like it has a little bit more character to the bokeh shape. It's definitely not spherical, but when it goes to the center in all three, it's only very slightly compressed from that circular shape to more of an oval shape. Now when it comes to the focus breathing in the 50mm, it does seem to be a little bit there, very similar with the 75mm as well, but when we get to the 100mm, there probably isn't as much as the other two. So that's the only slight difference between these three lenses is this focus breathing. Focus breathing is pretty standard when it comes to anamorphic lenses. They definitely don't breathe crazily too much, but there is some character to it. Now also at the bottom of the mount, what I do love seeing is Sirui have been adding the gasket there, which is the weather sealing gasket. It's fantastic that third-party companies are actually doing this as opposed to just letting Sony and Canon and Nikon do their own thing. But it's just great you have a weather sealed gasket here just to make sure that there's not going to be any moisture going into your sensor. But at the bottom here, you will see a USB-C port as well. So that's where you're going to be doing your firmware updates as well into the lens. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Are you going to be picking these up? They definitely are recommended from me. I do like them. It's a fast T1.8. It gives you that 1.33 times, anamorphic look. Not too much, but it's fantastic for those 16:9 or 17:9 sensors. Even still great for 3:2 sensors as well, because you'll still get a fairly decent 16:9 image out of it. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I've obviously put a link in the description below for these lenses. And hopefully I'm going to get the wide ones when they come as well. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, let's get it.